More than 3,000 Native American children died in the custody of the U.S. government after they were forced to attend so-called Indian boarding schools. That's according to a new investigation by the Washington Post. That is 3 times the number of lives lost that the government documented in its own investigation released earlier this year. And the real death toll could be much higher. We are joined now by the Washington Post's Dana Hedgepeth. She's one of the lead reporters on this series and is also an enrolled member of the Haliwa Saponi tribe of North Carolina. Dana, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Thank you.
There's this incredible discrepancy in the number of children whose lives were lost in your reporting compared to what the U.S. Department of Interior put out in its findings earlier this summer. How do you explain that discrepancy?
Very good question, and thank you for asking. The federal government, for the first time, under Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, who's the first Native American cabinet secretary appointed to that position, was the first person to ever step back, take a really hard look, and scrutinize her department, the very department that implemented this policy and carried it out. That's a huge step, and kudos to her department for doing that. They worked incredibly hard for 3 years, and they had a lot of findings that really turned the spotlight on themselves. They looked exclusively at federal records, solely at those. It was limited in scope, and they admitted that it was an undercount. They found 973 children died during a 150-year period at these schools. We built upon that work, and along with hundreds of thousands of records from the National Archives, from researchers around the country who had done the work, and we brought all that together to give the most complete accounting that's really been done to date, looking at the systematic effort of 400 schools across the country to wipe out Native Americans' culture.
I use the language of these children died in these schools, and I feel like that's almost a little bit of a sterile way of describing it. Can you talk a little bit about the conditions that these children endured and how they came to the end of their lives?
You're absolutely right. These conditions were horrific. There were 2 government reports done, one by the Merriam Report, Government Commission report in the 1920s that called these substandard. They were grossly inadequate. To call them an education, again, is not even fair. The children were mistreated. They were severely punished, whipped, beaten, starved of food. We found dozens of children who sadly died trying to run away from these schools. A young Navajo boy froze as he was trying to run away from the school. Children died of suicide. We found indications of abuse that likely led to students' death. These are not the schools that your children or my children in modern times would be subjected to. They really were not. And as a very wise woman from the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation said to me, "What schools have cemeteries?"